This is my ranking of games like Heroes of Might and Magic that I've played based purely on my personal experience. Each one is placed from masterpiece down to trash depending on how deep the strategy is, how good the turn-based combat feels, and how well the progression and map control work. Let's get straight into the list. Disciples' Liberation took me by surprise because it leans much more into RPG storytelling than I expected. I spent a lot of time making dialogue choices, dealing with different factions, and deciding who I wanted to support as the story kept raising the stakes. The tactical battles were the highlight, with plenty of unit variety and enough room to experiment with different army setups. I liked mixing units from different factions and finding combinations that worked well together in longer fights. The spell system also added extra flexibility and made battles more interesting. That said, some of the management systems felt awkward. The interface slowed things down more than it should have, and a few mechanics seemed poorly balanced. Bugs also got in the way at times. I place it in the good tier. Fort Triumph reminded me of why I keep coming back to tactical RPGs even when they are not doing anything revolutionary. The combat was easily the strongest part of the experience, especially because battles focus so much on interacting with the environment. I was constantly kicking enemies into objects, pulling them out of position, or finding creative ways to use the battlefield to my advantage. The randomized maps also helped keep encounters fresh, so I rarely felt like I was repeating the same fight. I never became invested in the story, and after a while I found myself skipping dialogue to get back into combat. The base management, skill progression, and menus felt more confusing than rewarding, while the small UI could be frustrating. This one settles in the good tier. Songs of Conquest felt like a modern love letter to the classic fantasy strategy games I grew up playing. What stood out most was how rewarding exploration was, because nearly every corner of the map hid something useful, whether it was resources, equipment, powerful locations, or new opportunities to strengthen my army. The campaigns were also surprisingly strong, with memorable characters and stories that kept me interested from mission to mission. Combat had the depth I was looking for, thanks to unit positioning, retaliation attacks, spell usage, and environmental interactions that made battles feel more tactical than simple number comparisons. The pixel art deserves special praise as well, since every map looked packed with detail and personality. While the game could explain some systems better, that wasn't enough to stop it reaching my great tier. The Dragoness Command of the Flame was one of the few games in this genre that kept reminding me of why I spent so many years playing Heroes of Might and Magic. Most of my time was spent exploring maps, gathering resources, building up my forces, and looking for battles that could strengthen my army. The combat is easy to understand, but there is still enough strategy in unit placement, target selection, and army building to keep fights interesting. I also liked how the roguelike progression gave me reasons to keep pushing forward, since every run helped improve my base and unlock more options. The story never became a major reason to continue, and the voice acting, menus, and presentation often felt rough. That is enough for it to claim a spot in my good tier. Stone's Keeper caught my attention with its unusual idea of managing a flying castle while leading armies across a fantasy world. I spent much of my time upgrading the fortress, recruiting new warriors, improving equipment, and preparing for the next challenge waiting on the map. The turn-based battles required some planning, especially when using terrain, cover, and positioning to gain an advantage over stronger enemies. I also liked that exploration played a major role, since uncovering ruins, artifacts, and story events made every journey feel worthwhile. The castle management systems added another layer of progression and gave me reasons to keep investing in my forces. While it does not bring many new ideas to the genre, the mix of strategy, exploration, and kingdom building kept me interested throughout. I place it in the good tier. Age of Wonders 4 kept giving me reasons to start just one more turn because there was always something new to experiment with. The faction creator was the biggest highlight, letting me build completely different civilizations and shape their identity through cultures, traits, rulers, and magical tomes. I enjoyed how my empire continued evolving during a campaign, with new spells, transformations, and units constantly changing the way I approached battles. The combat was also excellent, rewarding smart positioning, counterplay, and army composition while remaining easy to understand. Outside of battles, city management, diplomacy, exploration, and expansion all felt streamlined without losing strategic depth. Not every culture felt as distinct as I wanted, and I ran into a few technical issues, but the strengths easily outweighed the flaws. This earns a place in my excellent tier. Heroes Hour delivered the kind of fast-paced fantasy strategy experience that kept me making decisions almost every minute. I spent my time moving heroes across the map, securing resource locations, upgrading settlements, and growing armies capable of taking on stronger enemies. What stood out most was how little downtime there was between exploration, expansion, and combat, which kept every match moving at a satisfying pace. The random map generation added plenty of replay value, and I liked trying different factions to see how each approach changed my strategy. Although the battles largely play themselves, I still felt involved through spellcasting, army building, and planning ahead. A full campaign would have made the package even stronger, and pathfinding occasionally created small annoyances during exploration. This one reaches the great tier. Master of Magic became a game I respected more and more the deeper I got into its systems. I began by creating a custom wizard, selecting different magic schools, and shaping a strategy around the spells, creatures, and abilities I wanted to focus on. What stood out most was the amount of freedom available, since every playthrough could develop in a different direction depending on the choices I made. Expanding cities, researching stronger magic, building armies, and competing against rival wizards created a satisfying sense of growth throughout a campaign. I also liked that there were multiple ways to achieve victory, which encouraged me to experiment with different approaches instead of repeating the same strategy every time. The heavy micromanagement and some design issues held it back somewhat. This one settles in the good tier. King's Bounty: The Legend constantly rewarded me for exploring beyond the main path. I spent hours searching for treasure, building stronger armies, completing quests, and looking for ways to overcome difficult encounters. What I liked most was how it blended role-playing progression with tactical battles, giving me meaningful upgrades while still making every fight matter. The world felt full of surprises, and I was always finding new creatures, equipment, companions, and challenges. Combat remained engaging because careful planning, spell usage, and army management were often more important than simple numbers. Even though some quests and battles could take time, I rarely felt bored because there was always something useful to discover or improve for myself. Its mix of adventure and strategy was strong enough to earn a place in my excellent tier. Eador Imperium challenged me with its complex systems almost immediately, and rarely stopped demanding careful decisions. I spent much of my time exploring provinces, managing gold, expanding territory, developing infrastructure, and building armies capable of surviving difficult encounters. The tactical battles were the highlight because every fight required attention to positioning, stamina, morale, ammunition, and spell usage. I also appreciated how exploration was tied directly to economic growth, forcing me to think carefully about when to push outward and when to strengthen existing lands. There were plenty of interesting mechanics working together, and I could see the depth behind nearly every choice. Unfortunately, the slow pace often dragged the experience down, while the interface made many basic tasks feel more complicated than necessary. That places it within my good tier. That's my ranking of games like Heroes of Might and Magic based on my own experience. Not every game lived up to its potential, but the best ones kept me planning, exploring, and fighting for hours. Thanks for watching.